All right, so get ready because today we are diving deep into how native English speakers actually talk like in their regular lives.
Yeah, going way beyond those textbook phrases and, all those rules.
Exactly. We're talking about those unspoken things we do in conversations. And luckily, you shared some excerpts from this book with me called Conversation
Yeah.
by Rob Nolasco and Lois Arthur. And let me tell you, it is fascinating. It's like they were secretly listening in on like everyone's everyday
Yeah,
conversations.
like they were a fly on the wall.
Totally. And then like they wrote a guidebook about it. So are you ready to like unlock some serious conversational ninja skills?
Absolutely. Let's decode these everyday conversations.
Okay, so the book starts off talking about this thing called the cooperative principle,
Yeah.
which I'll be honest, sounded a bit, I don't know, like a textbook to me at first.
Yeah, it does sound a little formal.
But then when I actually like got into it, super interesting because it's all about how even in really casual conversations, we're all kind of working together to make sure things make
It's
sense.
like an unspoken agreement.
Yes, and the book lays out these like maxims that we generally follow without even realizing it. Like we try to be truthful, we give enough information, but not too much, just the right amount to keep things flowing.
Right. It's all about that balance.
But then, and I'm sure we've all been here, you get that response to a question that's like, Wait, what?" Like they technically answered your question, but you know something's off.
Yeah, you can tell something else is going on there.
Exactly. And that's often because like one of these conversational maxims just flew out the window.
It did. And that can make things awkward.
Oh, totally. And the book gives this perfect example. Imagine someone's like, "How did you like the play?" Right. So you're expecting like a comment about the story, the acting, like the actual play.
Right.
But instead, the person goes, "Oh, the lighting was good."
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Like they technically answered the question.
Yeah.
But they hated it.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
what's so interesting.
So the book talks about how that's like a violation of the relevance maxim. Like what you say should be relevant to what's being talked about. And when it's not, awkwardness alert.
It can definitely throw things off. It's like they missed the memo on how to have a smooth conversation.
It's so true. And it reminds me of those times when you're trying to like politely wrap up a conversation, but the other person just keeps going and going. It's like they didn't get the memo on how to do a graceful exit either.
And speaking of graceful exits, I found that whole section in the book about openings and closings so insightful. Because it's like there's an art to starting and ending conversations without making things weird.
Oh, tell me about it. You don't want to feel ambushed by a sudden topic change
Right.
or like left hanging wondering if the conversation's actually over. It's like, are we done here? I need some kind of signal.
Exactly. And the book gives some great examples of those like subtle phrases native speakers use, like, well, I should probably let you go. Or, speaking of which, I need to. Those little cues that are like, okay, time to wrap it up.
It's like a secret code. And once you know the code, you can navigate those transitions so much more smoothly.
Absolutely. It's like having a conversational roadmap.
Totally. So we've got these unspoken principles of cooperation, these subtle opening and closing moves. But then there's this whole other layer the book digs into, speech acts. And again, it sounds kind of formal at
It
first,
does sound a bit technical.
but it's really about like the hidden intentions behind what we say.
Yes, because we often mean more than our words actually say.
Exactly. Like you're at a restaurant and you tell the waiter, it's a bit chilly in here. You're not just making a random weather observation.
Right. There's definitely a hidden message there.
You're subtly telling them you want them to crank up the heat. It's a request disguised as a casual comment.
I've totally done that.
Yeah.
And the book made me realize how many of these speech acts we use without even realizing it.
Right. It's like we're all speaking in code sometimes. But recognizing those hidden meanings, that's key to understanding like the real conversation happening beneath the surface.
Exactly. It's like reading between the lines of a conversation. It really is. And, when we think about those hidden meanings, it reminds me of when the book talked about adjacency pairs.
Oh, yeah. Adjacency pairs.
Have you, noticed how sometimes in conversations there are these phrases that just naturally seem to go together?
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's like a conversational dance almost.
It is. It's like a call and response.
Yeah.
Like if someone says, hey, how are you? You almost automatically say,
I'm doing well, thanks for asking. How about yourself?
exactly.
Like it's just ingrained in us, right?
It is. And the book talks about how these pairs really help to keep the conversation moving, which I thought was so interesting.
Oh, for sure.
But what I thought was really interesting is how the book is encouraging us to go beyond just those simple expected responses.
Okay, yeah. Give me an example.
So instead of just saying, like, good, when someone asks how you are,
Right.
you could say something like, oh, I'm having a pretty good day, actually. I finally finished that book I was telling you
Uh-huh.
about.
Or
Or,
whatever it is. Oh, I love that. So it's like instead of just giving a one-word answer, you're giving them a little something to work with,
yeah,
like opening the door for a real conversation.
exactly. And
Yeah.
the book even gives this example with, like, let's say you're at a bakery or something, and you ask, are these cakes fresh?
Okay, yeah.
Instead of the person behind the counter just saying yes.
Right, which they totally could, and like that would be fun.
Exactly. But imagine if they said, oh, yeah, I baked them French this morning. Help yourself.
Oh, that's so much more welcoming, It makes you want to like stay in chat.
Right. And that actually transitions really well into, another big thing the book talks about, which is turn taking.
Oh, yeah, turn taking, the art of knowing when to jump in, when to like let the other person finish their thought.
It's so important.
Because we've all been there, right? Like you're dying to say something, but you don't want to interrupt, or you accidentally talk over someone.
The worst. It happens to all of us.
The book does a really good job, I think, of breaking down those little subtle cues that we might not even realize we're using, like those little signals that tell you when someone's about to finish talking or if they still have more to say.
Yes. Like when someone's voice starts to go down at the end of a sentence,
Yes.
or if they trail off a bit, or even like, those little phrases like, you know what I mean?
Oh, or even just those little filler words like, or like, I know people think of those as like bad habits.
Right. Like we should get rid of them.
But the book talks about how they can actually be helpful. Like there's signals that you're not done speaking yet.
It's like putting your conversational blinker on. Like, hold on, I'm not done yet.
Yes. I love that analogy. So, okay, we've got these unspoken rules of cooperation. We're navigating these turns, but then there's those like trickier conversational waters. Like, what about taboo topics?
Yeah. That's something we all have to be aware of, right?
Definitely. And the book actually goes there,
It does.
which I appreciate.
It does. And I think it's really important because, you know, what might be a totally normal conversation starter in one culture,
Totally. Could be like,
a huge no-no somewhere else.
conversation killer.
Exactly. And that's why I feel like, especially when you're learning a new language or you're in a new culture, you really do have to be so mindful of those like unspoken boundaries.
It's like you're not just learning the language, you're learning the culture. Okay, so we've talked about all these like social dynamics of conversation, but then the book also gets into like the actual sound of English in conversation.
Right. Like the nitty-gritty.
Yes, and I'll be honest, I'd never really thought about it before reading this,
Yeah.
but it's so true because like music has rhythm and melody, right?
Yeah.
But spoken language does too.
Absolutely. It has its own musicality.
And if you can master that, it makes such a difference in how natural you sound.
It does. And the book talks about things like, for example, weak forms,
Weak forms, okay.
which sounds very official.
That sounds very official. What does that even mean?
It's basically like how certain words get shortened or kind of blended together when we speak naturally.
Oh, okay. So it's like instead of saying, I'm going to the store, it's more like, I'm going to go to the store.
Exactly. And then there's elision, which is when like a sound actually completely disappears.
What? A sound disappears.
It does in fast speech.
Wow.
Like when we say wanna instead of want to.
Oh, right. Okay, I never even thought of that.
Yeah. So it's like our brains are filling in those missing sounds without us even realizing it.
That's wild. But, even with all of this, like, kind of technical stuff, what I really appreciate about this book is that it gives you, like, actual advice and activities you can actually use what you're learning.
Yes. It's not just theory.
Right, exactly. So, for example, one of the things they talk about is this activity called Find Someone Who.
Yeah.
Okay, Find Someone Who. I feel like I've definitely done this one like a million times.
Oh, yeah. It's a classic for sure.
But it's a classic for a reason,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Because it's so simple, but it like really works
It does.
to get people talking no matter what their level is.
Totally. And it helps you practice your English in a way that doesn't feel like you're, studying.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like homework.
Exactly. You're just like chatting and getting to know people.
Yeah, I remember I did one of these Find Someone Who activities at like a conference, and I ended up having this like fascinating conversation with someone I never would have talked to otherwise.
Exactly. It's like you find those commonalities.
Totally. And then another activity the book mentions is this one called If Only. What? Oh my gosh.
If only.
Have you ever noticed how sometimes like complaining can be kind of therapeutic?
Oh, 100%. Sometimes you just need to vent a little.
Right. Like get it out of your system.
Exactly.
But this activity is cool because it's not just about like complaining to complain.
Yeah, there's a method to the madness.
It actually helps you practice using those like if clauses, hypotheticals, but
Exactly.
in a way that feels natural.
Totally. Like, if only I hadn't eaten that last slice of pizza.
If only I hadn't stayed up so late.
Exactly.
See, we're practicing our grammar without even realizing it.
There you go.
Sneaky, sneaky. Okay, but then, sometimes you need more than just like a casual chat to really level up your skills. So the book also talks about these role-playing challenges, which sound kind of
A little
intense,
bit, yeah.
but also really helpful.
Yeah, because it's like throwing yourself into the deep end a little bit.
Yes. Do you remember that airport scenario from the book
Oh, yes.
where you're like stranded at the airport
Oh, it's the worst.
with a bunch of like frustrated passengers and you have to use all your powers of persuasion to get on a flight?
Yes, and you have to do it all in English.
Oh, talk about pressure.
Right. High-stakes communication right there.
But in a way, that's kind of the best way to learn, right? Because you're forced to just use the language.
It is. It's like trial by fire.
But honestly, I think what surprised me the most about this book was how much emphasis they put on like the stuff we do that's not even words.
Oh, yeah. The nonverbal stuff.
Which we don't even think about, but it makes such a difference.
It really does.
Like even just those little encouraging noises we make when we're listening.
Oh, totally. Like, or right?
Yeah. Or really. Like I used to think those were just like filler words.
Right. Like, we should try to get rid of them.
But the book made me realize they're actually so important.
They are.
Because it shows the other person that you're actually listening, that you're engaged, that you want them to keep talking.
It's like giving little nods of encouragement as you go.
Yes. It's like saying, I'm with you, keep going, I'm hooked. And then, of course, there's body language, which is like
A whole other language.
a whole other ball game. Like the way you're standing, are you making eye contact? Are you smiling? Are you frowning?
Right. All of that sends a message.
Oh, totally. And
Yeah.
it can totally change the meaning of what you're saying, too.
It can. So it's really important to be aware of it.
Okay, so we've got all these amazing tools and techniques from the book. But let's be real, like even with the best intentions, even if you know all the rules, sometimes conversations can still go a little bit sideways.
They do. They do. We're all human.
Exactly. So the book talks about how important feedback is
Yes. Crucial.
for actually like improving your conversation skills. Because how do you know what to work on if no one ever tells you?
Exactly. We need that outside perspective.
But then it can be kind of awkward, right? Like, hey, can you critique my conversation skills? Like, who wants to do that?
Right. Who wants to be put on the spot like that?
Exactly.
I think the book mentioned recording yourself, if you're comfortable with that,
Oh, that's a good idea.
so that you can, like, listen back and hear how you sound.
It's like holding up a mirror to your conversation style.
It is. Are you, like, interrupting a lot? Is your pace too fast? Are you using those encouraging noises?
Okay, those are really good things to listen for.
It really makes you aware of those little habits.
So I think what we've learned today is that conversation, like real, natural, fluent conversation, it's about so much more than just like grammar rules.
Oh, for sure. It's so much deeper than that.
It's about understanding those unspoken rules, those subtle cues, the music of the language.
It's about connecting with another human
Exactly.
and sharing ideas in a way that feels natural and engaging.
Beautifully said. It's like learning to dance with language.
I love that analogy.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the fascinating world of conversation, I want to say thank you so much for sharing these excerpts with me and for this awesome conversation.
This was fun. I always learn so much from these conversations.
Me too. And for everyone listening, keep those conversations flowing, keep those connections strong, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.